The Power Group is a supplier of civil infrastructure services such as roads, bulk earthworks, structures, buildings, housing, as well as project engineering and property development services for private and public clients in South Africa, as well as elsewhere in Africa. Our vision is to be the first choice supplier of these services for our clients, and our purpose is to improve the quality of lives in Africa through infrastructure development. As a company, we are guided by our values of caring for our people, quality, reliability, ethics, and professionalism. Thus, in conducting our business activities, we place extreme importance on the safety and health of our employees and affected stakeholders. Our people are our greatest asset, and their safety and health take precedence of any other priorities within the business. I remind all employees that we are jointly responsible for the safety and health of ourselves and those around us. It is the responsibility of every employee to act in the event of any potential unsafe situation or activity and bring it to the attention of the supervisor and fellow employees.
The Power Group is committed to 1. Compliance with all relevant requirements, including the OHS Act, construction regulations, client specifications, and other applicable legislation. 2. The prevention of incidents, injuries, and occupationally caused ill health. 3. Regular and ongoing communication to all active employees with regard to responsibilities and obligations in terms of safety and health. 4. Rapid and decisive action and communication in the event of any incidents with regard to lessons learned and improved methods of prevention are to be shared across the organization. 5. Holding all employees accountable for their actions and their responsibilities. According to Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it is the responsibility of the employer to make sure of the following. The employer should provide a safe and healthy work environment. The employer will do risk analysis and put corrective or preventative measures in place. And employers will inform, and instruct employees to complete the job successfully. Each person should at all times take responsibility for safety to ensure zero harm to yourself and others. According to OHS Act Section 14, you as an employee have the following duties. According to the Occupational Health and Safety Act Section 14, the employee on the project should make sure of the following. Take reasonable care of your own safety and those you could affect by your acts or omissions. To cooperate with the employer to comply with the health, safety, and environment rules and act. It is at all times important to report any injuries to your supervisor immediately to ensure that all people working on site are always working in a safe and healthy environment. Remember to always report incidents immediately when they have occurred, and always remember to report any other incidents such as any near misses, environmental spillages or releases, if any property damage has occurred, and any security incidents or any health-related issues. Hazard is exposure to anything that may cause harm. For example, chemicals, electricity, working on ladders, open excavations, moving of construction machines, etc. Risk is the chance, high or low, that somebody could be harmed by hazards, together with an indication of how serious the harm could be. Health and safety training. If you are unsure of how to do your work, inform your supervisor immediately so that you can be trained on how to do it safely. Do not, under any circumstances, work if there is an unsafe condition at your workplace. Please report this to your supervisor or health and safety rep and safety officer. You must undergo a medical assessment before you commence your job. Rules. Before entering the site, you need to always take note of the following general rules. All visitors must report to the main gate or entrance of the site to receive proof of a visitor's identification. Intoxicated employees, through drugs or alcohol, are not allowed to enter the workplace and may be randomly subjected to an alcohol test through a breathalyzer. No unauthorized cameras are allowed. No firearms and ammunition, knives, or traditional weapons are allowed. Driving or working whilst using a cell phone is prohibited. Entering unauthorized areas or operating machines on the plant without authorization is not allowed. Theft, assault, and willful or negligence to comply with safety, health, and environmental rules shall lead to dismissal. Racism, victimization, gambling, horseplay, sexual harassment, and fraud are also not allowed. In the event of any emergency, look for your nearest emergency number list there on site and pay special attention when your emergency procedures are discussed with you by your supervisor. Nobody is allowed to transport workers on the back of a vehicle without seats, safety belts, and rollover protection. No-go areas will include all areas other than your designated working area. Always be alert and remain focused on your surroundings to minimize risks and avoid accidents from occurring. Never walk backwards on the construction site, as it will cause you to trip and fall. Life-changing Rule 1: Vehicle and Road Safety. Critical behaviors. Only operate a machine or equipment if trained, authorized, and competent to do so. Never override or modify any safety-critical equipment or devices. General requirements. The operator must have a valid driver's license for the specific vehicle to be operated and always carry such a valid license. Permitted to operate vehicles and are medically fit and licensed appropriately according to the type of vehicles. An inspection to ensure the vehicle being operated is correctly onboarded, licensed, and in good safe condition may be conducted. Where required, the state of roadworthiness must also be checked. An induction or training program and testing will be conducted to ensure that all drivers understand and comply with the use of vehicle and other driver safety rules. Adhere to the designated speed limits. The operator must wear a seatbelt. Not allowed to use a cell phone. Only use cell phones in safe areas, and take care when driving in dust. Life-changing Rule 2: Lifting and rigging. Critical behaviors. Only operate, guide, direct, and assist if you are trained, authorized, and competent to do so. Never override or modify any safety-critical equipment or devices. General requirements. No persons may under any circumstances enter an area under a suspended load. The lift area and drop zones must be delineated, restricted, and appropriately signposted. Cranes and other lifting equipment must have at least 20 meters clearance from power lines. Clearance to be measured using machines' fully extended capabilities, unless a risk assessment is conducted and documented to identify controls to allow for operations within 20 meters. Safe working load, SWL indicators, must be legible and may not be exceeded. Cranes and lifting of equipment. The next hazard or risk that we need to take a look at is working with or near overhead cranes. These points will help you remember what is important. Overhead cranes may only be operated by competent and authorized personnel. Always keep hand, fingers, and feet away from the loads. Do not put your limbs at risk, especially under loads. Be vigilant for crane sirens, as they indicate a moving overhead crane. Overhead crane remote or pendulums must be signed out and controlled by the operators. Please remember that these may not be left unattended. Tandem lifts will be done in fabrication workshops with the overhead cranes. Always keep clear of these activities when in progress. Maintenance may only be done on cranes after locked out, and only competent or authorized persons may do so. Cranes must be inspected on a daily basis and records kept. Do not use any defective lifting tackles on cranes. Under no circumstances may any person ride on a crane, hook, or load. Crane movements must be smooth when in operation. Always ensure that there are at least 2 loops of cable on the winch drum. Ensure that loads are lifted high enough to clear objects and obstructions. Always keep loads as close to the floor surface as possible. Never pull the hoist by the pendulum control. Always familiarize yourself with the location of the disconnection switch. Should electrical loss of power occur, always return all buttons to the off position. Remember to always be alert and safe when working on site to avoid any injuries to yourself and others. Lifting equipment and materials. Lifting of equipment and materials is the next high risk and hazard on site. To ensure that you are always completing your job safely and properly, you need to ensure all lifting gear is inspected and color-coded every 3 months. Color codes are available at stores. If not color-coded, do not use. Inspect all lifting gear and machines before use. Lifting above 5 tons, or if it is an awkward lift, remember that you need to have a written study. All lifting gear and machines have a load test certificate. Only riggers that are competent may perform lifting work. Lifting areas must be demarcated. When lifting is in progress, all warnings should be given. Manual lifting. Always ensure that you are using the correct manual lifting procedure. Step 1. Make sure your feet are in the correct position. Step 2. Bend your knees and keep your back straight. Step 3. Use the correct grasp when lifting any materials. Step 4. Use your body weight to help you and ensure that you hold the load close to your body. And step 5, the principle is to put your hand on the stew as far as possible. Life-changing Rule 3. Mobile plant and equipment. Critical behaviors. Only operate plant or equipment if you are trained, authorized, and competent to do so. Never override or modify any safety critical equipment or devices. General requirements. A procedure and checklist system, including a brake functionality test, shall be in place for pre-operation inspection by the operator. Logbooks shall be maintained on the machine and audited. Process for checking shall be in place to ensure vehicles are not overloaded. Systems shall be in place to ensure mobile plant and equipment operates only on sufficiently stable surfaces and on gradients that are within the limits of safe operation. Parking standards shall include requirements for the immobilization of mobile plant and equipment, for example, chocking or the use of ditches or trenches, and consideration for breakdown maintenance activities. Procedures shall be in place to provide details of the maintenance tasks that an operator is allowed to perform, and the operations that maintenance personnel can carry out under testing conditions on site. A tire management system shall be in place to address issues including tire changes, fire, separations, heating, explosion, electrical contact, maintenance, etc. Mobile plant and construction vehicles. Being aware of any construction vehicles and operating any construction vehicles on site, it is very important that you be extremely careful of vehicles and mobile plant equipment, such as forklifts, tractors, trailers, trucks, and mobile cranes. It is also very important that you are competent and authorized to operate the equipment. Adhere to the designated speed limits. Never use your cell phone when driving or operating any machinery or vehicle. Do not bring any bicycles or motorcycles on site. Never smoke while driving or operating machinery, and ensure that flag people are deployed with all moving cranes, reversing vehicles, or slow-moving vehicles. Operators may not allow any other employee to store their personal belongings, foodstuffs, drinking water or cell phone on any construction machines or construction vehicle at any time. Operators may not allow other employees to charge their cell phones or any other similar devices on a construction machine. When working close to a mobile plant, if you can't see the operator, then he or she can't see you. Never enter a work zone area where construction machines are busy working. Report to the supervisor of that work activity before entering the work zone area. Only enter the work zone when it is safe to do so. Ensure to make eye contact with the operator before proceeding into the work zone. A drip tray must be used under vehicles and mobile plant during refueling and maintenance activities. Dispose of contaminated water and liquid solvents in the hazardous waste containers provided. Operators are to remain on the existing haul roads and within the road reserve. When working close to or crossing a public roadway, always be vigilant of oncoming traffic and and proceed only when safe to do so. Life-changing Rule 4. Lockout and isolation. Critical behaviors. Always isolate and test for dead prior to working on any energy sources. Always use critical personal protective equipment. General requirements. A risk assessment must be conducted and documented to identify the hazards and assess the risks associated with interaction with energy sources, electricity, pressure, temperature, stored energy, etc. Training requirements include: all relevant personnel must become familiar with basic isolation and be capable of identifying primary and secondary energy sources. Particular emphasis must be given to the test for dead verification. Personnel involved in energy isolation must be trained in the relevant isolation and emergency procedures and in the use of related equipment, devices, PPE, and other protective apparatus. The 12-step isolation process is: 1. Identify the energy source. 2. Advise relevant parties. 3. Isolate and secure. 4. Place devices, tags, locks, and permits. 5. Verify isolation. 6. Commence work. 7. Complete work. 8. Check work. 9. Clear area. 10. Remove devices, tags, locks, and permits. 11. Restore energy. And 12. Check operation. Energy and mechanical lockout. No person will perform any electrical, hydraulic, or mechanical work unless it has been ensured that there is adherence to the lockout procedures and that all moving parts of machinery have been isolated. Electricity. No person will perform any electrical related activities on site without being declared competent and adhering to the electricity related standards. Electricity is extremely dangerous and can kill you. Life-changing Rule 5. Working at heights. Critical behaviors. Hook up at heights and always use critical personal protective equipment. General requirements. A risk assessment must be conducted and documented to identify the hazards and assess the risks associated with working at heights. Persons working at heights must not work alone. Working at heights and potential to fall. Performing any work on heights remains the largest risk on site. To prevent any falls or other incidents when working at heights, take a look at the following. Engineer out any and all fall risks by installing handrails, knee rails, and toe boards. If this is not possible, then make use of fall arrest equipment and techniques. All people working at heights need to be trained properly and know how to use fall arrest equipment where required. Use lifelines when working at heights, as well as retractable lifelines. Remember that when any work is done above 1,5 meters from any level, always use your fall arrest equipment if the platform has not been declared as safe to continue work. Scaffolding. When you are working on or near scaffolding, it is important to be aware and check out for the following. If the scaffolding has a green tag, it is safe for use. If it has a red tag, it means that the scaffolding is dangerous and is not safe for use. If the scaffold has no tag, it is also not safe for use, and no work can be completed using the scaffold. Check that the scaffold has handrails, knee rails, and toe boards, and also that a ladder provides safe access, including a trapdoor, unless the scaffold is low enough and does not require a ladder. Make sure that the floor is complete and that the openings have been covered. Any scaffolds should at all times be level and of a solid nature. Only competent scaffold erectors may erect, tamper, or modify scaffolds. To stay safe, always check for these points. If it does not comply, report this to your supervisor and remember to wear and hook up your harness when working above 1,5 meters. Ladders. Wooden ladders must be in good working order when in use. When you are using ladders, always make sure that you use the buddy system. One holds the ladder while the other uses it. Extension ladders must protrude at least 90 centimeters above the area you want to reach. Use a rope to tie the extension ladder secure at the top. Inspect the ladder before use. If it is defective, return to the stores. Always face the ladder when using it and use both hands. If using an A-frame ladder, do not step above the third last rung. Always secure tools and objects using lanyards, tool belts and buckets, as these may fall and cause serious injuries. Remember to use a harness and hook it up if working above 1,5 meters. Life-changing Rule 6. Excavations. Critical behaviors. Always conduct pre-work risk assessments. Always use critical personal protective equipment. General requirements. Check proximity and physical conditions of structures nearby. Check that all equipment, materials, supplies, permanent installations such as buildings or roadways, trees, brush, boulders, and other objects at the surface that could present a hazard to employees working in the excavation are removed or supported as necessary to protect employees. Employees exposed to vehicular traffic shall be provided with and shall wear vests or other suitable garments marked with or made of reflective or high visibility material. The relevant signage, lighting, etc. shall be provided as needed to perform work safely. Public protection. Guardrails, fences, barricades, including the relevant signage, shall be provided on excavations adjacent to walkways, driveways, and other pedestrian or vehicle thoroughfares. Warning lights or other illumination shall be maintained as necessary for the safety of the public and employees from sunset to sunrise. Water hazards. Employees are not permitted to work in excavations that contain or are accumulating water, unless precautions have been taken to protect them from the hazards posed by water accumulation. Precautions may include special support or shield systems to protect from cave-ins, water removal to control the level of accumulating water, or use of safety harnesses and lifelines. Barricading and excavations, openings and exposed edges. No person will enter any barricaded area unless deemed necessary by the legal responsible person, or unless barricading has been erected properly according to the standards. Barricading is also required where there are overhead hazards, open trenches or excavations, or hazardous work processes, open flooring, or grid mesh or lifting operations. A person who installs barricading should leave a written statement of his or her details, for example, telephone number and employer details. Excavations or other openings will be demarcated or barricaded. When entering or exiting an excavation, use the safe access provided. Never place tools or materials near edges of excavations, openings or levels, as these items may fall onto someone below. Ensure that a 1.5 meter perimeter away from excavation trench walls is kept. Life-changing Rule 7. Confined spaces. Critical behaviors. Always seek and obtain a permit before entering a confined space. Never work in a confined space alone. General requirements. A confined space procedure should include the following: identification and signposting of confined spaces that exist within the operational site, a confined space register, a pre-risk assessment, atmospheric testing, and clearly defined conditions of entry. And conditions of entry may include the provision and use of safety harnesses with lifelines attached for recovery of persons in the event of rescue, access to the permit at the job location, nomination and identification of a competent standby person who shall be present at the entry point for the duration of the work. Confined spaces. No person will perform any work in a confined space unless the confined space has been tested for gas, a lifeline is used, and a fellow worker is standing by outside the confined space. Permit to work. No person will perform any work on project work areas unless tasks being executed that are defined as permit work are completed with a specific permit. Work is competent only according to the permit requirements, for example, confined spaces, excavations, contractor work, welding on flammable or combustible equipment. Life-changing Rule 8. Hazardous chemicals. Critical behaviors. Always know what to do in case of an emergency, and always use critical personal protective equipment. Hazardous chemicals. When you are working with hazardous chemical substances, also known as HCS, on site, you should be aware of the following: All HCS containers must be labeled properly. MSDSs, also known as Material Safety Data Sheets, must be used for understanding the product, its risk, and any PPE requirements before using a product. All HCS must be stored as per the MSDS requirements. Contaminated PPE must be disposed of in an HCS container. These are black containers. All employees must be trained in the relevant MSDSs. No unauthorized access to any bulk fuel or gas storage areas is allowed. Hazardous waste, for example, oil rags, contaminated soil. General waste: A. Recyclables, paper, glass, tin, and plastic. B. Non-recyclables: organic, food leftovers, foam products, wood, textiles, etc. When hazardous substances such as oil, diesel, and petrol are spilt, it must be reported to the supervisor in charge of the operation. Read the label on the container before use. Life-changing Rule 9. Safety devices and guards. Critical behaviors. Always use critical personal protective equipment and never override or modify safety critical equipment or devices. Machine guards are also very important to protect your fingers and hands from getting injured. Always remember to never tamper with guards, as this is not allowed. Ensure that all rotating or moving machine parts must have guards. Inspect machine guards before usage, and remember that guard openings are not allowed to be larger than 6 mm. Ask your supervisor if you are unaware of how to complete your job safely. Life-changing Rule 10. Safeguarding against falling and rolling objects. Critical behaviors. Never stand in line of fire when loading or offloading items, and always use critical personal protective equipment. General requirements. All working platforms higher than 1.5 meters shall have tow boards installed within 150 mm from the edge of the working platform. At steeply inclined workings, stalls or roll arrest barricades shall be constructed to support the mass of the material and people. All equipment shall be fit for purpose and undergo pre-use checks and a minimum of 6 monthly or biannual documented inspections by a competent authorized person. Material control. If you are working with any material control, make sure that you take note of these important points. No unauthorized usage of any forklifts or plants. All operators must be trained for forklifts and plants to be operated. Speed limits must be adhered to and pedestrians have the right of way. No forklift may be overloaded. Standing on forklift blades is not allowed. Always secure all loads on forklifts. No passengers allowed on forklifts, and always wear a safety belt and perform startup inspections. These points are extremely important to ensure your safety on site. Hand tools. Hand tools are dangerous if you are not declared competent or trained to use these tools. Always be sure to only use tools for a job that has been specifically designed for that purpose. When working at heights, it is important to ensure that any tools are attached to the relevant lanyard or tool belts to avoid any falling objects. Make sure that you always inspect any hand tools before use and that you take responsibility to ensure that your tools are kept secure and in good working condition. Tools and equipment. Only operate plant, equipment or tools if you are competent and authorized to do so. If you are asked to perform tasks or use tools or equipment that you are not competent in operating, inform your supervisor immediately and do not proceed until trained. Do not repair or perform maintenance work on any plant unless qualified or authorized to do so. All maintenance and repair work must be done when the equipment is switched off and unplugged from electrical sources. Personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment, PPE, which has been issued to you must be worn where necessary. The minimum PPE requirements for this project is safety shoes, reflective clothing, safety glasses, hard hat, spats, and safety gloves. Whatever is required for your job. Any additional PPE identified by a specific task risk assessment will be issued to you. It is your responsibility to look after your PPE and report any broken PPE to your supervisor immediately. If you need your PPE to be replaced, you need to return it before new PPE is issued. If PPE is lost or carelessly broken, you may be charged for the reissue. Before starting any job on site, it is vital that you understand the hazards and risks that you may come across when working on site. Please pay careful attention to the following. Obey all warning, mandatory and information signs displayed. Red, prohibitive, must not do. For example, no smoking, no entry, etc. Please note that firefighting equipment may also be depicted by a red sign. Blue, mandatory, must do. Yellow, caution, hazard warning. For example, wet floor, fragile roof, high voltage, etc. And green, safe condition, the safe way. For example, first aid, escape route, assembly point, etc. Cutting and grinding. When any cutting or grinding activities are being performed on site, remember that only employees trained and competent are allowed to perform these functions. Use personal protective equipment, PPE. Additional equipment includes double eye protection, such as face shield and safety glasses, leather apron and spats, hearing protection, leather gloves, and long sleeves. When grinders are not in use, they must be unplugged and always ensure that the discs are the correct type for the grinding machine. Always inspect equipment before use. If defective, return to the stores. Always protect the areas from flying sparks. Screens must be placed when working near walkways or elevated areas. Always route cables safely and keep out of water. Hot work and welding. There are also many hazards and risks involved in completing any hot work or welding activities. Make sure that you are properly trained and that you look out for your buddy. Always check that only competent people are performing these activities. That you wear the correct PPE in addition to welding helmets and cutting goggles, leather apron and spats, and long sleeves. Always mark the areas where hot work was done, as employees could sustain injuries such as thermal burns. Always use welding screens when required. Always check the area for combustible material. Gas bottles. When you are doing any work with gas bottles, always inspect equipment before use, and if defective, return to the stores. Use daily soak tests. Individually secure gas bottles and use bottle trolleys to move cylinders. Never tamper with gas bottle valve guards. Ensure that flashback arresters are in both ends of the gas bottle hoses. These can be identified before the torch and at the bottle. Ensure that gas bottles are only lifted in gas bottle cages. Only use crimp clamps on hoses and proper clips to keep pipes together. And use gas bottle trolleys to transport bottles on site. Incident reporting. Report all incidents to your supervisor or safety officer as soon as possible. When you see others not working safely, do not ignore it. Rather point it out to them immediately. It could save a life. In the event of someone being injured, the first person to find the injured person must ensure your own safety as you approach the injured person. Do not discuss the incident with external persons, for example media or bystanders. Pass comments or make speculations. Emergency arrangements. In case of an emergency, please do the following. When you hear the emergency evacuation siren, or have been instructed to evacuate the area, walk safely to the assembly point. Assist colleagues and visitors where needed. Follow your supervisor's or emergency coordinator's instructions. Remain alert for further announcements or instructions by senior management. Return to your workplace only when instructed to do so by the emergency coordinator. Housekeeping. Make sure that your work area and walkways are free of rubble and any obstacles. Check your work area regularly and clean up at the end of the day. If trip hazards are starting to build up, clear it as soon as possible. If tools and equipment are not in use, pack them away neatly. Cables, extension leads, hoses and steel wire are common trip hazards, so please ensure that it does not cross walkways and access points. Fire prevention and firefighting arrangements. No unauthorized fires are allowed. If you see a fire, please notify the supervisor, safety officer or firefighting team members immediately. Firefighting equipment is strategically positioned on site. Do not smoke near gas, petrol or other flammable substances. Smoking is only allowed in the designated smoking areas. Make sure to kill the cigarette butt and dispose of it in an ashtray or suitable container. Make sure you obtain permission from your supervisor to have a braai. Do not use cell phones, MP3 players or any other similar audio devices while working on site. Only do so when you are standing in a safe zone, where you are not in danger from being injured. Operators of construction machines may not under any circumstances while operating mobile plant and equipment use their cell phones, MP3 players or any other similar audio device. No hands-free devices must be used. These devices may only be used when you are standing still, parked your construction machine in a safe zone, switched off your machine, and it is safe to do so. The use of earphones is not allowed. Note, cell phones may be used while you are driving a motor vehicle, provided that a hands-free device is used. Health. Make sure that you undergo testing for HIV or TB. Eat and ablution area. Where provided, designated eating areas will be used for lunch and tea breaks. Wash hands after using the toilet and before eating to ensure good hygiene and prevent illness. Keep all welfare facilities clean and tidy. Designated toilet facilities are located on site and must at all times be used for purposes of relief. Do not use the bush. Environmental induction. Obey all environmental symbolic signs and notices. No littering or burning of waste is allowed on site. Waste containers will be clearly marked, so please throw all waste in the correct containers or bins provided. Water leakages from taps and hoses must be reported to the supervisor immediately and repaired as soon as possible to prevent water wastage. Ask your supervisor or site SHE officer to remove animals found on site. Do not pick flowers, remove or cut down any trees or plants without permission. Notify your supervisor of any strange-looking artifacts, which look like archaeological specimens. Do not attempt to remove it. Do not swim in or drink from rivers, dams and streams. Do not work in or near water bodies, for example, dams, rivers or canals, etc., unless you are instructed to do so. Thank you for watching this video.